Okay, so it is 4 o'clock. My name is Jay Pfeiffer, career counselor for Central Washington University, and I am here today to talk to you about interviewing. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me just well. I do have everyone currently muted. If you have a question, please put it into the chat box and I will try to answer them as we go. I appreciate everyone showing up today. I wasn't expecting such a turnout, but very happy to see you. And this is going to be something that is going to be very pertinent as interviews are going to be changing. You're going to have to learn and adapt to doing things online in a way that once was not really something that we thought we would have to do. So hopefully this will be helpful at any point in time. Again, you have questions in the chat box. You can also find a lot of great resources as well as the ability to book appointments with career counselors at cwu.edu/career. That's our webpage. But all of that being said, I am going to share my screen and let's get this party started. So, okay, where did my screen go? There we go. It took a second. All right, so we are going to talk about acing the interview, trying to make an impression that lasts. Just a quick overview of everything we'll be talking about today. I'm dealing with a little bit of lag here on my end. I do apologize for that. Hopefully it won't be an issue, but we're going to be talking about the purpose of the interview, how you can understand yourself to better sell yourself for those positions, researching the organization, the interview itself, and then at the end, I'll save some time for a question and answer session. So without delay, we're just going to jump right in. I mean, the purpose of an interview for the interviewer or the employer, recruiter, whoever it might be, is to determine if you're a match and to assess your qualifications to make sure you're actually qualified to do the job that you're applying for. The opposite side for you, it's an opportunity to sell your qualifications. This is your shot to connect those dots between the skills that you have and the skills that they're looking for, and hopefully finding that there is a match there. And it's also a good opportunity to determine if you want to work there, because ultimately that is your choice. You may go to an interview, get a very, very bad feeling about it and decide, you know, this isn't for me. So you have to make sure you're asking probing questions just like they're going to be to determine if there is a match between you and the interviewer. So when does the interview begin? A lot of people will think it's when you sit down with the interviewer itself, or the interviewer themselves. That is not correct. It's not when you check in with the receptionist. It's not when you pull into the parking lot. It's not when you leave for the appointment. It's not even several days or hours before you get there. The interview begins the moment you make the appointment for the interview. At that point, you are on the clock. You need to be preparing yourself. You need to be exploring your values, making sure the job is going to be congruent with who you are as a person, and most importantly, researching the firm. Because the one thing you don't want to walk in and have them ask the first question, you know, why are you interested in working here? And you're already drawing a blank. There's nothing better than preparing and practicing before going to an interview, because ultimately interviews are muscle memory. It's like learning to play a sport or an instrument. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. I mean, I was abysmal when I was younger, but I've been doing this like pretty much every day for the last 10 years now. And obviously you pick up some steam. So you need to make sure you have the ability to do some practice in the lead up to it. So just some quick ones. I'm not going to go into this. Usually I, try to show off, my socks and shoes and belt combination. I'm not going to do that today because I'm not wearing socks, shoes, or a belt. But hey, go COVID. Anywho, for the men, you want to have a solid color conservative suit. I generally recommend against black suits. You're just going to pick up everything that you lean up against or touch all day, and you're going to be worried about it, and you want to make sure you're lowering your stress during an interview. If you can go with like a white or blue long sleeve shirt underneath, generally speaking, solid colors. You don't want anything too wild. Conservative tie, I say conservative tie, and I mean like simple colors or patterns, not anything crazy going on. You don't need to have like some giant anime tie or anything. You don't want anything too distracting. You want to try to play it safe. You're going to wear dark socks and professional shoes, and your socks, your shoes, and your belt should always match, gentlemen. If you're wearing black shoes, you should be wearing black socks and a black belt. Probably one of my more memorable interviews I ever did is when a candidate came in, did really well in the interview, was dressed very well. He leaned back and kicked his feet up, and he was wearing white athletic socks. That just kind of ruined it for me. You're going to do very limited jewelry. Again, you always want to play it on the safe side. If you have piercings and whatnot, if you can take them out, that's ideal. Or if you can get like the little placeholders that are skin colored, that's great. Not that you can get a haircut right now. I'm actually sporting my COVID cut, but you need a neat professional hairstyle. Go easy on the aftershave. I mean, a lot of times people just go crazy with that. Like if you've ever walked into the Cirque after the career fair, if someone were to light a match, the place would go up in an instant. You don't want to smell like a bottle of Axe body spray. Trim your nails, and you want to have some type of padfolio. I have mine right here next to me, always by my side, or briefcase. The reason for that is because you can write your notes and keep them in there. You want to collect the business cards of everyone you talk to, so you can keep that there. You can make copies of your resume and keep that in here as well. And you don't have to carry around a whole bunch of bags or worry about fumbling through stuff while you're actually trying to focus on the interview at hand. For the ladies, again, solid color, conservative suit, whether it be skirt or pants, take your pick. Obviously, this is where knowing the company is going to help you quite a bit. You want to coordinate just like the gentleman with some type of white or blue or solid color blouse. I recommend moderate shoes. You do not want to use an interview as your first attempt at wearing high heels. You're going to probably be more focused on not falling on your face than making a good impression. If you have flats or anything, maybe a 2 or 3 inch heel, but something you're going to be comfortable wearing. Again, limit the jewelry. You don't want to have like 10 rings on and 15 earrings. You want to try to limit that as much as possible. Neat professional hairstyle, if you can get one, that's a way to go. Or in this video world now, you can get away with a lot of stuff. You can throw on a hat or do something with your hair, put it back, get it out of the way. Tan or light hosiery, sparse makeup and perfume, manicured nails. And with the nails, you want to make sure they're either going to be clear or a natural color. You don't want to walk in with like bright neon nails. And again, portfolio or briefcase. Now there are, a lot of good resources on dressing for success at the career site. I would recommend taking a look at those, but I just wanted to make sure I covered it in general because the devil's in the details. You want to be dressed better than they are. The one thing that students are always asking me is, well, if it's a company where they're relaxed, can I just go in a polo shirt? I would recommend not doing that, honestly. You want to go in and be the best dressed person there. Now, obviously, hopefully you've done your research ahead of time, because sometimes at interviews, they might be taking you out on a tour or actually going and visiting some of the sites that they're working at, depending on the occupation. And you're going to want to make sure you're prepared with either a change of shoes or clothes if you need to. So you need to ask all those questions ahead of time to make sure you dress for success. How are we doing? Is everyone still with me? Can I get a thumbs up in the chat? All right, that's okay, be shy. You keep your secrets. All right, so things to be aware of and avoid when you're preparing. Strong scents, smoke. If you're a smoker or you have roommates who smoke or vape, keep that stuff away from your clothes. The cologne, the perfumes. Oh, there we go. There we got a thumbs up. Thank you, sir. The cologne, and because we are in Washington, I always do recommend be aware of jazz cabbage. If you have roommates or anybody, you want to keep your clothes away from those activities. You don't want to be rolling into an interview smelling like you just walked out of Cheech and Chong's van. Other things you want to be considering: tattoos. You can also think about the company. Is it a conservative company? Are they more liberal? Obviously, different occupations are going to have different professional standards, but if you can cover them up, I recommend you cover them up. If you can wear long sleeves or something with a collar, that is going to be helpful. I always say err on the side of caution. I'd rather be too conservative than go in there and, you know, have them walk out and say, well, we can't pick this person because of something stupid, like their tattoo or they have a nose ring. Get the job, find out what the actual dress code policies are, and then go from there. But when you aren't employed by them yet and you're interviewing, play it safe. And the other thing, just the piercings, the jewelry, if you can, you know, you wear a watch, make sure you turn it off, especially if it's like a smart watch, so that it's not vibrating or beeping during the meeting. You want to try to avoid as many distractions as possible. You know, when you get there, you want to turn your phone off and put it in your bag and be done with it, or just leave it in the car. You want to try to minimize as many distractions as possible. So when you're getting to the interview, a couple things to know, and these are going to be for in-person interviews. I'm not sure when we're going to get back to this. It might be the fall, it might be the spring, it might be a year from now. But if you're going to do an in-person interview, you need to know how to get there. I recommend doing a dry run, generally at the same time of day, the day before or a few days before, just so you can get a feel for, is there going to be traffic? Do I need to have change for the garage? Is there parking validation? If it is a large building, especially it's like if it's in Seattle or over on the west side, what is the name of the building? What floor is it and what room is it? There might be 3 or 4 businesses sharing one floor and one building. You don't want to roll up with 5 minutes to go before your interview and then have to try to figure out where you're going, what floor it's at, what room it's in, what elevator do I have to get to. You want to do that ahead of time, just to take the guesswork out of it. Arriving early, you don't want to arrive crazy early, like 45, 50 minutes early, where you're just kind of sitting there being awkward, but you don't want to show up just as the interview begins. General recommendation is around 7 to 10 minutes. And when you get there, you need to be nice to what I call the gatekeeper, whoever the administrative assistant is there. They may not be on the committee who is selecting the employees, but I can pretty much guarantee you they're going to have a very strong opinion if you're out there in the waiting room acting like an idiot, or if you're just on your phone the whole time. Get there early, be nice, make some small talk. It's going to help you along the way. And what you're going to bring, again, you're going to have that portfolio, Padfolio. I forgot where I put it. It's back here with the Legos. You're going to have your wonderful Padfolio. You're going to bring extra resumes. Make sure you have a pen and paper to take notes, and a small bottle of water. When you get nervous and your mouth gets dry, you tend to start drinking more water. If you're sitting there and you chug a 64-ounce flask of water in about 5-10 minutes at the beginning of an interview, you're going to have to go to the bathroom before the end, and that's going to be a distraction. So again, small bottle of water, pen and notepad, extra resumes, all in one place. You don't want to have like 15 different bags, like you're coming in, like you're moving into this place. Travel light. So up to this point, I've just basically covered dressing yourself and actually getting to the interview. One part that a lot of people skip on the interview itself is just knowing what you're looking for in the position. And a lot of times you are going to get these questions at some point during the interview. And if you don't have an answer already in hand, you're going to struggle. So you want to be thinking ahead of time, what are my career goals? Where do I want to be? You know, am I going to continue my education? Am I looking to move up into management? You know, what exactly am I hoping to do? Where do I hope to be in 5 years? Very popular interview question. You should have some sort of idea already in your head by the time it comes out of their mouth, so that you can actually respond to it. What are my educational experiences? I have to move my hands up or sit up straighter so that you can see them. You know, what is my educational experience and what does that mean? How does my coursework relate to the job here and what I've already learned? What experiences have I had? A great way to prepare for interviews is to think of like 3 experiences you've had in your life, generally professional related if you can, and commit those to memory. Or commit them to heart, so that you can pick up at any point in one of those stories and just start talking. You don't have to constantly sit there and think, well, when did I do this? Or when did I do that? You want to make sure you're pretty much ready to go when you get there. And lastly, just your personal skills and abilities. If there are certain technical hard skills they're looking for, you want to make sure you're able to communicate that to them in an easy way, and how you've used those skills in the past. But you want to make sure you have an understanding of yourself and then an understanding of the organization. And at minimum, the least you should know about them is basically, you know, how did they start and what is their current mission statement. They're going to ask generally questions that sound like, you know, what do you know about our company? Why did you choose to work for us? You're going to have an answer. So it's probably a good idea to do the thinking on that ahead of time instead of trying to come up with something on the spot. But when researching the organization, a couple things I would highly recommend taking into consideration would be their history. You know, where did they start? Do they have a story? What is the culture of the organization that you can find out about? Do you know anyone who works there? What is the organization's philosophy and objectives? You know, do they like giving back to the community? Are they trying to do something more wide-ranging? But you should know what their philosophy is, even if it's just the mission statement. If they have products and services, what are they? You know, if you go into an interview at Expedia and they're like, well, what do you like about Expedia? You don't want to say, well, I don't know, what do you guys do? You want to be able to talk about booking, travel, etc. Also, good things to know for yourself and about the organization. Will there be advancement opportunities? And what is the geographic location? Obviously, you know, you're probably going to know that ahead of time, but you're going to want to know, you know, is there a possibility that if I get this job, will I be sent somewhere else? Do I have to relocate? So knowing yourself, knowing the organization is going to get you into the door. And I've already talked about getting to the door. So, I mean, at this point, if you've done your homework, you're as prepared as you're going to be. And now let's dig into the actual interview. So during the interview, you've got things to figure out and fit together. Do you want the job? Which is a very big one. You know, are you going to be happy there? Can you do the job? I always see the meme with like the person who says they can speak Spanish on the resume and then they get the job. You don't want to be that person. That actually happens sometimes. So you don't want to lie about your qualifications just to get a job, because you're going to get there and they're going to find out. Will you fit in? That's going to be hard to determine during an interview, but will you fit in? You know, if you're talking to the people and you feel comfortable during the interview and you like what you're seeing, you're probably going to fit in and you can ask questions. And then the last one is, will you be self-sufficient? Because you could have the greatest job in the world and you can love it to death. But if you have to live with 7 different people in a 2-bedroom apartment over in Seattle in order to make it work, that's not going to be sustainable long-term. So you want to make sure that geographically where you're going to be living, you're actually going to be able to afford to live there. So I've already covered all of the dress, the assertiveness. I can't really demonstrate a handshake here, or I don't know when we will be able to demonstrate handshakes. But I always say, don't try to crush the other person's hand. It's not a competition. You also don't want to give them like the cold, wet, like limp hand, or like bowing to the queen. A normal handshake, semi-firm, make sure you get in there all the way, web to web, and make connection, but it's not a competition to see who can crush each other, and you don't want to come across like you've never shaken a person's hand before. Body language is going to be hugely important, especially in the digital realm that we're in right now, because they're going to be recording these and they can see pretty much everything you're doing. So you want to make sure that you're sitting up straight. If you know you're someone who's going to swivel around, if you have a swiveling chair, get a chair that doesn't swivel. If you're someone who taps, you know, you can sit on your hands. People won't see your hands. But make sure you're aware of what kind of signal you're sending off. A lot of times people will sit with their arms crossed, and that's just basically saying, I'm not listening to you. So you don't want to come across casual or too chill. But at the same time, you know, having good posture, good body language is going to help you out, especially in the virtual realm. There are generally 2 types of questions you're going to be asked at the interview. The first are what I call the traditional interview questions. These are standard questions that are easily answered and generally are about you or the job you've applied for. Some good examples of this are, tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? What has been your greatest accomplishment? Should say a really, really popular one. What is your greatest strength or what is your greatest weakness? So when you're answering these, you want to be straightforward. I'm going to give you a quick breakdown via acronym because I know everyone loves acronyms. But we are going to be talking, when you're answering these questions, always make sure you're talking in positive or neutral language. If they ask you questions about like a time you had to work with a difficult person, you don't want to go and just absolutely lambaste them for the next 15 minutes. You might not want to say that somebody was dumb. You might want to say that, you didn't see eye to eye on things. You weren't fired, you parted ways, or you didn't quit, you looked for different opportunities. And especially never speak about the former employer or supervisor, because even if you aren't listing them as a reference, there is a chance that they might reach out to them. You're going to check off a box somewhere during the application that says they can talk to your past employers. So you don't want to spend a whole lot of time trashing your past employer and then walk in and have them call them up. So stay neutral. You're going to be giving short answers for these traditional interview questions. And you want to answer them using what I call the APR method. Nothing to do with finance rates, but if someone asks you a traditional question like, why do you want to work here? You're going to use these 3 steps. You're going to answer the question, I want to work here because I've always loved Amazon. I've been a Prime member since I was born. I love the company ethics, and I'm a big believer in everything that Jeff Bezos said in the letter to the shareholders. So you're going to answer the question. You're going to provide an example of basically how you've done that in the past, how you've answered that question. And if you can, you want to relate it back to the company. So if I were to do this all at once, if they ask a simple question, what's your greatest strength? Well, my greatest strength is my ability to multitask. I have been in the past able to, successfully work as a faculty member doing instruction, at the same time doing career counseling. And I think that's important to your company because you have to be flexible and be able to move around. The best answers are generally, I don't want to say the shortest, because if it's too short, it's just going to sound weird and awkward. If people are like, well, what's your greatest strength? You want to be like, well, I'm really, really good looking, and then stop talking. That's not really a strength anyway. You generally want to be in around the 90-second range with your answers. This goes for all of the questions, so you want to make sure that you're answering the question and giving a good example. Also, if you don't have an answer right away, it is okay to ask to take a minute to think about it. You just don't want to do that for every single question. It's going to start to seem weird after a little bit. So if you need time to think about it, that's fine. You just don't want to use that over and over again. You might just want to use that once or twice. But asking for a moment to pause, to collect yourself is totally fine. Also, if you want to take notes while you're doing these, while you're in the interview, I recommend asking first, but it's always a good idea to take some notes while you're doing it too, because they might ask you something that you want to follow up with on later, but we're going to get to that in a moment. I don't want to rush ahead. So the non-traditional questions are what employers really, really like, and these are what we call behavioral-based questions. These questions are always based in some type of scenario. Generally, something you've already done before is the example you're going to be given. But if you hear the words like, tell us about a time when, or could you talk to me about a situation you were in that this happened, if they're putting you in some type of situation, it's a behavioral question. And when you are answering behavioral questions, it is very important to give the 4-part STAR response. And what is STAR, you may be asking yourself? Well, the STAR is, what was the situation? What was the task at hand? What actions did you take? And ultimately, what was the end result or response? So if I were to do a behavioral question right off the top of my head, tell us about a time you worked with a difficult person. It is my opinion that everyone who goes to college has the shared misery of being in a group project with someone who does not do anything. So let's just talk about it from that example. So if they say, tell us about a time you had to work as part of a team and the team faced conflict. So you're going to say, well, the situation was my Business 200 class. The task at hand was putting together a pitch for a fictitious company that we had come up with. Unfortunately, we had one member of the group who was not very engaged, did not answer emails, was not coming to our meetings. So the action we took there was trying to reach out to them over and over again. But when that didn't have any results, what I ended up doing is we went and talked to the faculty member. As a result of all of that, when we did the final presentation and they didn't show up, we all received A's and they did not pass the class. I used the words in there actually to break out each of the 4 STARs. You don't have to do that. I'm a career counselor. I talk like a career counselor. As long as you are covering those 4 bases, you're going to be fine. Now, you may also see this exact same thing listed with some other acronyms. I've seen SOAR, SOAR, but it's always the same. It's the same 4 things. It's just a different way of saying it. So if you are in a behavioral question, you need to make sure you give that 4-part STAR response. And in my experience in higher education, the one the students miss the most is the response. You get so excited to talk about that situation and you nail the task and the action, and then you never actually wrap up and conclude the story. So, if you're going to be doing this, if you can, maybe write the letter STAR somewhere on a Post-it note or on your notepad. The one thing you want to avoid doing is, basically turning everything around your screen, if it's going to be a video interview, into a Post-it note telling you what to do, because then you're just going to be looking off all the time. Your answers start to sound canned. I really don't want you to go that route. So, general questions that you might get from an interviewer. These are just some of the top ones that are out there. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I will say, if it's a weakness, don't go negative. Don't be like, oh, my biggest weakness is that I just can't get up in the morning, or I can't finish things on time. If you have a weakness and you don't want it to be anything that's to the opposite direction, like my greatest weakness is that I just care too much. Yeah, it's awesome. But if they're going to ask you about a weakness, you could say your weakness is that you sometimes struggle in in juggling multiple tasks. And that's fine to say that. It doesn't mean that they're not going to hire you. But what you need to follow that up with is basically telling them that you're aware of that this is an issue and that you have something in place to overcome that shortcoming. So what accomplishments are you proud of? Why do you want to work for us? What are your career goals? You should have probably heard some of these before at this point. How would you define a good manager? Now, at the end of the interview, they're always going to ask you, what questions do you have for us now? You have to have something. You can't just be like, good, and walk out the door. You want to make sure that you go into this interview process generally with about 3 to 5 questions saved up, ready to go. There's a very good probability that maybe 2 or 3 of them are going to get answered during the interview. But when they get to the end, you want to have those prepared questions, whether they're written down or they're memorized, so that you have something to talk about. And generally, you could ask them about the organization's strengths or what kind of training can I expect. I like to turn it around on the interviewer and ask them questions. Why do you choose to work here? What's your favorite part about this company? How did you get into the position you're in? Or what are my opportunities for professional development and advancement? If you can get them talking and keep it conversational, it takes the pressure off of you. And they're not going to have any problem talking, and hopefully you'll have a very good conversation and they will remember that. So Jay's top tip for interviewing: if you can, try to get them talking. It takes the pressure off of you and it gives you a little bit more room to go along with the interview as more conversational, as opposed to just constantly asking and answering questions. Inappropriate questions. Hopefully this is not an issue you should have to deal with, but it does pop up from time to time, especially right now if people are, especially if they are a company that's trying not to hire students that they're going to have to sponsor for visas or anything like that. But inappropriate questions generally include race, gender, age, religion, ethnicity, and national origin. If you get asked one of these questions, you don't jump up and be like, gotcha, Jay told me you can't ask me that. You owe me a job now, because they are not going to give you a job. Generally, I say if they ask you a question like this, you can tell them that you're not comfortable answering it, or you don't feel that it's relevant to the position. If you feel that you are up against a wall or that you have nothing to lose and you want to answer the question, that's fine. But if they are asking you questions that they know legally they're not allowed to ask you during the interview phase, that should be a huge red flag. Do you really want, and that was one of the first questions I asked, do you want to work for this company? And if they're asking you stuff like this, the answer is probably no. I'm not going to tell you to run, but if they're already being shady just during the interview, the odds are that it's going to continue further on down the line. So you've gone in, you've gotten to the interview, you've dressed appropriately, you've answered all the questions flawlessly, you've nailed your traditional with the APR and your behavioral with the STAR responses. Everything is over now. Hopefully you've collected business cards from everyone you've spoke to during the day. Now it's time to follow up. And that doesn't mean get out to your car and send a text message to the person you just talked to. Generally speaking, one of the good questions you can ask at the end of the interview is, what is your timeline for making a hiring decision? If they tell you that they are collecting collecting resumes for the next 90 days and interviewing people, you've got some time. You can send a nice thank you note, like a handwritten one, through the mail. People love that stuff, especially in recruiting. If they tell you, however, though, that like they're making a decision in 2 days and they're calling back candidates next week, you don't have time to send a letter, especially not right now, and never if you live in Ellensburg, because our post office is just beyond slow. But in that case, then yes, you can send an email, make sure it's formal and it's appropriate, but you always need to make sure you are following up. You need to make sure you're showing some level of initiative, that even after the interview, you're still interested in the position, because one of the biggest complaints I hear from recruiters right now is students who just ghost them. And I thought that was only a dating thing, but apparently it's also in career development now, where they will have an interview with someone, they will try to call them back to set up a second interview or to make an offer, and the student just never returns their call or returns their emails. If you're not interested in the position, just let them know. If you're waiting for someone else to come back with an offer, let them know that. Don't leave people hanging out in the wind. Again, you're trying to make a good impression. You have to keep it up for a very long time. And remember, the interview begins as soon as you schedule the appointment, and it ends when either you're hired or they've passed on you and moved on. So you need to make sure you're leaving a great impression and a lasting impression, and you're taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. I mentioned this before, but practice makes perfect. You have a lot of different things that are available to you. You can use your webcam on your laptop. You can ask a family member, whoever is in disaster lockdown with you, to ask you some questions. You can ask yourself questions to a mirror. The best one probably out there, though, is our mock interview module through the Wildcat Career Network. We have a little over 250 pre-recorded interviews in there. If you have questions about that, or you want to set up a time to talk about how to do that, please contact Career Services. We'll be glad to make sure we can take care of that for you. And we also do mock interviews via chat now as well. But practice makes perfect. You're going to start to learn, hey, am I someone who my head's always bouncing around? Because you're going to see that. Do I just constantly say, like, and you can start to remove those things. And your speech will become clearer, your communication will become better. And again, it's going to make it easier for you to connect with these individuals. Phone and Skype interviews, I just touch on these because in the past it was kind of a side note, you might have to do this, but now it is, you are going to have to do this, at least for the foreseeable future. Things to take into consideration: a quiet location. If you have kids running around like I do, make sure they have the iPad or Frozen 2 for a couple minutes so that you can have some peace and quiet. Make sure your internet signal's good. If you have terrible internet, don't try to do like a full HD chat with somebody. Make sure your bandwidth is good. And if it's not, try to find somewhere or do something in order to correct that. If the Wi-Fi is just not cutting it for you, go out into your box of cables, find a LAN and or an Ethernet, excuse me, and plug that directly into the router to try to speed things up. I hit on this earlier, don't depend on the notes. It's very obvious when people have notes all around them and they're doing this while answering the question and reading like an old text to voice program. So don't depend on notes. Make sure you smile every once in a while. I know you're nervous, but make sure you're smiling and you're happy. And even if you're on the phone, dress up, at least from the waist up, because that's all that anyone can see. But don't be lying around in your pajamas with your hair all a mess. So the top things that you should take away from this, what is it that impresses the recruiters? Preparedness, personality, and personality can be a tricky one. You have to know how much of your personality to let out at any given time. If you are someone who is kind of like me and is a little bit outrageous, I blame that on New Jersey. You might have to dial it back during the interview, but you don't want to dial it back so far that they think you're boring. So you have to make sure that they can see some of your personality, but not so much or so little that it's going to eliminate you from being hired for that position. They want to know that you have career goals. They want to be able to see that you can effectively communicate. Appearance is going to be a big part of it. And lastly, your experience, whether that be education or your real world experience, but that is what's going to impress them more than anything. But last but not least, the two biggest things that they look for, a level of initiative and ambition. Too many times recruiters talk to people, and they say, well, what are you interested in our company? Well, I just need a job. That doesn't show any initiative or ambition. Following up shows initiative and ambition. Coming prepared shows initiative. The other side of that is being humble. You don't want to take it too far. I have worked with students who went into interviews and told people what their company was doing wrong, what they were doing poorly, and how they would fix it, which in theory might sound good in your head, but you don't want to go talk to the person that's going to be hiring for your job and telling them what a crappy job they're doing already. So you have to have some level of humbleness, that you're willing to learn, and that also blends into the initiative as well. So like Kendrick says, stay humble, and like I say, show that initiative. Additional tips and tricks, just stay positive. Always pull from your past examples. Too many times students will give kind of generic half-hearted answers where they say, tell us about a time that you had to work with someone who isn't like you, or someone who was vastly different from your personality. And instead of giving a specific example, well, there was this time where I worked with this person and this happened, you'll kind of cobble together a homogenized, well, in the past, I've worked with some people who did this and did that. Don't be vague. Be able to give a confident, specific example and communicate effectively to them. Make sure the responses are organized. So if you have to use the letters of STAR in order to make sure you say situation, task, action, result, use the letters from STAR. But make sure that you're not just talking in circles for like 3 minutes and then you've forgotten what the question is and then you start to panic. If you find yourself talking for like more than 90 seconds to 2 minutes and you're not sure what you're talking about, stop talking. Stop talking, rehash with them, that was very interesting. Can you just repeat that question again, just to make sure I've covered everything. But those are my additional tips and tricks. Again, I will bust out that we have the Career Services website with also the career guide that has a lot of really good stuff on there. We do our drop-in counseling, which actually won't exist right now. We do mock interviews through the Wildcat Career Network and through Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams or whatever you have. And you can also always call on us for our individual career counseling. All of that being said, that is my spiel on interviewing. Let me bring back up the chat window. And I would love to hear your questions now if you have any. Don't be shy. But maybe not all 9 of you at once. Are we all good? No questions on interviewing today? Going once?
So I got one
Yes,
question.
all right. Thank
So
you.
like, you know how you say you bring your portfolio, have a, you know, have it with you, have your resume with you. Would it be, I mean, is it advisable to take like your, say, laptop and have like, you know, a 1-point lesson on there, you know, everything, you know, more like viewing instead of just talking about it?
I mean, you can do that. You just want to make sure you're traveling light. If you have a shoulder bag, you can throw a laptop and that in there. That's great. They're probably not going to have time to look at stuff unless they actually ask you to bring a portfolio or some samples. But there's no harm in bringing the laptop. I've never been asked to bust out a laptop. Usually, if they ask you to bring something, it's a presentation or something that you can throw on a thumb drive where you don't need to bring your entire PC with you.
Okay. Okay. I guess the thumb drive would be it'd be ideal, easier to carry, and yeah.
So question here from the chat, pursuing a job in education. I was wondering what questions you think best are asked for the school district. I would defer this ultimately to Jesse Allen, our career counselor over in the education department. But from my experience, you know, what is the school district? You want to know about the, you know, what is the demographics of the school district? Those would be good questions to ask. Where do they see their shortcomings or what are their strengths? Again, you know, you can always pull stuff out of hopefully what you've already learned about them to fill in those questions. But, you know, you might even want to, you know, dip into pedagogy, you know, or mixed methods or whatever it is that's on your mind. But I would just make sure you keep it education related and that, you know, there's some sort of background reasoning to the questions you're asking. R2D2 and Yoda, thank you. What things would you address when asked about tell yourself? All right, so tell me about yourself is a tricky question. Generally speaking, I get 2 responses when I ask the can you tell me about yourself question. I either get way too much information. No one needs to know like your entire life history or what trauma you've been through. What they are looking for with those, and the other side is as people will just say literally nothing. Well, I am a computer science major and I want to work on mobile apps. Well, that's not really telling me about anything about yourself. Tell me about yourself should be related to what you are actually applying to do. So, I mean, if someone says, tell me about yourself, you know, well, for me, I'll just use me as a generic example because I know me pretty well. But I mean, you know, I wanted to be a career counselor because I have gone through career shifts at different stages in my life. And it's something that I always found very helpful. And I wanted to be able to give back to the community, to offer something else based on my own experiences. Or, you know, if you want to be a teacher, you know, I've always wanted to be a teacher since I've been, you know, 6 years old. My mother was a teacher or whatever it might be. You just don't want to go into like really, really, really deep details. I've had people tell me some like weird stuff, some dark stuff. It's not a therapy session. So tell me about yourself, keep it on the up and up, make sure it's relevant, and don't overshare. Anyone else for the greater good? Good questions. Thank you so much. It's nice to have a little bit of feedback. I'm not just in here at my dining room table staring into a void. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to wrap up now. We're hitting 45 minutes. I very much appreciate you all coming today. I've actually recorded this, so I will be editing it and then uploading it onto the Career Services website at some point on our video channel. But if you have questions, you can always find me very easily. Oh, how to leave a lasting impression. I would say the lasting impression, you want to leave a good impression. You don't want to be remembered for something bad. That's usually the most lasting impressions people leave. But I think just the way you handle yourself, and especially the way you follow up, is going to leave a lasting impression. Are you someone who just kind of came in and then they never seen or heard from again? Or even if they said, we've moved on, you weren't selected this time, do you follow up with them and ask, how could I have done better? But that following up is going to be what leaves that lasting impression. Do most employers expect a thank you email after the interview? Yes, 100%. I mentioned this earlier, but if you can find out what their timeline is for hiring, if it's one of those questions you can ask at the end. If they tell you it's going to be a very, very short turnaround, you need to get the email out. But if you have the time, send the letter. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into employers' offices after or during recruiting, and they've got the letter there from another student the year before, still sitting on their desk. So yes to a follow-up email or thank you note, and that also builds on that lasting impression. Great questions, thank you. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. This will be posted on our website eventually. And if you have questions, if you want to do a mock interview, please reach out to Career Services. I am Jason Pfeiffer. I am embedded in the College of Business, but that doesn't mean I only work with business students. If you enjoyed this and you want to reach out and schedule an appointment, you can also go to our bookings page on the Career Services website and just book an appointment with me at your leisure. I appreciate everyone coming today. I hope you found this informative, maybe even somewhat entertaining to break it up, the monotony of everyone being stuck at home. It is a beautiful day out there. I hope to go out and mow the lawn, and hopefully you guys will go out and get some fresh air too. Thanks for coming. Stay healthy, stay safe. Have a great day.